Hi, everyone, and welcome to our graduate case study review. If you are newer to our system, we do this every other week in our groups because we are just so incredibly proud of our clients. We are thrilled to be able to share the progress that they've made in a short interval because we believe that this is really inspiring. And we know that having a child diagnosed with dyslexia can be very overwhelming. It can be arduous. You can be told many things that are completely untrue about how this has to be a multiple year journey that has to be a lot of pain and rule based and all of these things that we know from experience can be done in another way much more successfully. So today I want to celebrate one of our recent graduates, Ashley, a 9-year-old gal who went from being 52% accurate in phonological awareness, meaning like when she was trying to hear sounds in words, it was a misfire literally half of the time, to being 83% accurate. Her score in reading on the wide range achievement test 5 went from the 10th percentile to the 75th percentile, and her score in spelling, also on the wide range achievement test 5, went from the 5th percentile to the 10th percentile. But it's a little bit deceiving because she had additional items that were just one letter off. So she definitely had all of the sounds there, but in some cases the pattern required an EE and she had an EA, for example. So had she had those items right, it would have put her spelling score at the 63rd percentile. So just massive, massive gains in all three of those areas. But what was really fun is we interviewed Ashley's mother, Tiffany, throughout this process, and we learned from her about life for Ashley before and after. So I think that's one of the benefits of having these case study reviews is that we can definitely talk about the data and what statistical significance means in education and all of those things. But what's really powerful is the human story of transformation that occurred right alongside of this. So for Ashley, she was in special education and had an IEP at school. And so they started with us in April, and by May, so they were just in module 2, just getting started in the course, they already had had an IEP meeting where the team was saying like, oh my goodness, we're going to exit her from this and this intervention and this intervention because her scores are showing so amazingly much progress in just this short period of time. So we'll talk about that more in a minute. But basically for Ashley, she went from reading at the kindergarten level and reading CBC words, crying every day because of how hard it was, to now saying, oh, Mom, I need to go to the library. I'm out of books. And so Mom said it has been absolutely transformational to see the difference for her. So let's kind of dive into this. If you are newer to our community, again, welcome. But I'm Dr. Rebecca Troy, owner and founder of Retrain the Dyslexic Brain. And what we do is we employ cutting edge neuroscience techniques to help a child to reorganize how their brain is hearing and responding to language that makes reading and spelling exponentially improved within just a few months. And what's awesome about this is that we give these tools to families. We know that sometimes it's not possible to get daily one-on-one support that is required in order for the brain to actually make changes. We need that repetition. We need that plasticity to take effect. And oftentimes it's just not possible within a school setting to get this type of one-on-one support. Even if you were able to do tutoring, likely that you could tutor every single day for the interval, doing exactly the things that are needed in order to move things forward. And so what we found is that by giving these tools to a caring parent who is willing to show up to do the work, we have been able to see these massive statistically significant changes in the child. And so everything that I am about to show you is done or has been done by Tiffany, Ashley's mother. And so through our coaching and our course, like we've guided her through exactly what to do with Ashley, but it's really Tiffany that was able to do this work in her home, which we think is just so powerful to empower yourself as a parent to be able to do that. So before we dive into the scores, I want to just make sure that you understand deeply what dyslexia actually looks like in the brain and why this is so powerful. So over on the right, you can see an fMRI image of two brains. So on the left, you have a person that does not have dyslexia, and on the right, you see someone who does. And so what's important to know is that this image was taken during a language task. So if you were to ask the person to read a list of words or read a paragraph or spell this word or write me an essay, the brain is going to take on this profile during a language task. So what we see is that there is activity back here in this occipital lobe where vision is controlled. And we also see activity here on the sides in the parietal temporal lobe, where a lot of how we hear and process information takes place. And so when we compare that to this right side image, we see a very striking difference in how the brain is actually performing during language tasks. We can see that for the person with dyslexia, we don't have here in this occipital lobe of the brain, and we have far less activity in this parietal temporal lobe, which is why if we ask a kiddo with dyslexia to read the word cat in front of them, they might be able to decode through that. And then if we see that same word 2 lines later, it's possible that we might not be decoding that accurately. And it's because when we process visually what we see, there's not activity for language. And the same thing would be true, if we're trying to spell, you could add letters in or omit letters because vision and the auditory processing systems of language are not activated simultaneously. So this is another view of kind of the same thing where we've got this time an EEG, but you can see that the neural activity of a typical reader versus a reader with dyslexia is different during a language task. But here's what's really powerful. The brain is a dynamic organ that is capable of change over time. So whether, we're studying what happens to London cab drivers after they've had to study the map of the city, we know that the brain physically changes to have more spatial relationship. We know that if we do meditation for a certain amount of time daily, you can have a significant change in what the brain function looks like. We know this after stroke patients. We know this for many, many areas of life where we work on something, repetition and with the right tools, and we can see physical changes in the brain. So what we're really talking about is reorganizing how the brain is hearing and processing language so that reading and spelling can be exponentially easier and something that the child is able to do with ease. So this is basically what happened for Tiffany and Ashley, and we want to be able to tell their story. So everything that I'm about to share is actually feedback that we got straight from Tiffany, Ashley's mom. So Ashley was a third grader when she joined our program, and she did, like most kids in this time frame, have a stint of remote learning. So that was in Ashley's kindergarten year, which is difficult. You do learn a lot of language tasks in kindergarten, and it's possible that due to COVID, Ashley wasn't maybe introduced to some of those things, but Tiffany saw challenges for her in reading right off the bat. So they did what typical parents do, is they started intervening. They started doing tutoring. They went to special places for tutoring. She had an IEP implemented for her at school. She was in interventions at school. And, Tiffany said, gosh, those felt like they were constantly changing. But despite being in all of those interventions, third grade, she was still reading at a kindergarten level. She was reading basic CVC words, but still mixing up letters, had tears if the word reading was even mentioned. She was feeling like she was stupid, feeling discouraged, hating school. Tiffany said she felt how you would expect a student to feel who's trying her best and not getting anywhere would feel. She said nothing was working. So mom, Tiffany, was a former educator, and she said, I didn't really understand why. Like we were doing all of the things with her that we knew to do, But I now know that it was because we weren't addressing the underlying fundamental causes. And, I didn't know what I know now thanks to the program. So it was frustrating because there wasn't really any progress. She learned her letters and sounds, but in terms of putting all of that together, it was really, really limited. So what was amazing, that she started with us in April. Her mom shared that when she started the program, she could see that her deficits were so much more than what she thought. Ashley was struggling to even hear sounds or just hear syllables in general. It was super, super difficult. But once those things fell into place, she just took off and she hasn't looked back. I asked Tiffany, I said, what was it like for you as the parent to be doing this with her? Sometimes you drop your kid off at the tutoring center and you don't really know what happens. Where are the deficits? What are you working on in there? And she said, being embedded in this process with Ashley really gave her a lot of empathy for the situation. She could see just where the deficits were and how severe they were when they started. And so she said, yeah, I totally get it why she wasn't able to do this assignment, or I totally get why she struggled reading this story. And because I knew the core deficits and we were working on those, I had a lot more understanding of how Ashley's brain worked and why that was so difficult. But what was amazing is that through this process, Ashley started seeing that her results were paying off and she was growing and growing. And so for Ashley, Tiffany said her mindset completely switched. Um, you know, she was able to get a lot of value and support through the Q&A calls, which she felt were helpful and inspiring. You realize that you're not alone on this journey. And so, we do have mindset coaches embedded in the program. And, she felt like her mindset coach was also valuable in Ashley getting these results because she gave her things to work on, to have support, to be a part of that learning environment that was really positive and growing. But in general, Ashley said, oh my gosh, she's reading now, and that's amazing. And she feels so confident and so good about herself. So I think that's a big part of this, right? Like, we want the child's skills in reading and spelling to increase, but just as importantly, we want their confidence and their independence and to feel good about themselves to grow exponentially too. And so what was beautiful is that as Ashley's skills continued to rise, so too did her confidence. And so she said, oh my gosh, now she's got a book in her hand almost all of the time. She's happy because, she shared that she always wanted to be able to do this. It's not like she wanted reading to be difficult and you could see her trying really hard, but she just was never successful. And so once she was actually able to do that reading on her own, she wanted to go pick up a book and she wanted to continue reading. And so now, she's saying things like, oh my gosh, I need to go to the library. I'm out of books, which Tiffany said is super fun. Because when you compare it to, every time we even said the word reading, we were in tears. It's truly a transformational shift to have her confident enough to want to be reading books, to be reading books successfully. And, like, she's getting dopamine from that process because she's anticipating that she's going to be successful. Therefore, she wants to read even more. So it ends up, that you're putting this kid on a freight train that's going in the positive direction, which is exactly what every parent wants, is for their kid to be kind of set in the direction of success. Tiffany knew that Ashley is a super bright girl that has so much potential, but there was this one piece with reading and spelling that was really holding her back from getting to that potentiality. And now that she's put these things back together and she's able to read and spell successfully, it's been really, really beautiful to see how things have changed. She said, oh my gosh, she's coming to the table ready to learn. She knows that she can do hard things. It wasn't easy. Mom said I much rather would have had a magic wand, but it was worth it. It's been a wonderful experience, and we're just thrilled about the outcome. We feel like the foundation is there to really build on, and it's magical, like when we talked about how it's affected her mindset. She did say, like, we really weren't sure that Ashley was going to go to college. We had kind of resigned to Ashley might be more of a career ready type girl. And not that there's anything wrong with that, she said, but we just kind of closed that door that Ashley might actually be ready for college or able to go to college. And so she shared that, just the other day, her and her husband were having a conversation, and he said, you know what, don't discount Ashley, because I think she can. I mean, so when you look at what's possible and how they're dreaming for her and what they're thinking about and what Ashley is able to think about, I mean, that's a transformational life event. I mean, we're going from, I don't know that I want to read period to like, holy cow, maybe there is a whole bunch more opportunity than I ever dreamed possible for this kiddo. That is truly what we would consider a transformation. So Dad saw a video before and after of Ashley reading. Tiffany had done a video of her at the beginning of the program and again at the end. And, Dad had tears of joy, started to cry over just how absolutely blown away and super proud he was of her progress. So I think it's just really, really powerful. I mean, Tiffany said, thank you for the tools. I feel like everyone should know what you have taught us. And it's powerful, right? Because again, this was mom that made this transformation for her daughter. So she knew that what was happening at the school was not working, or it was not working to the level that she wanted. And so she took it upon herself to say, yes, I'm going to get educated. I'm going to take this into my own hands. I'm going to work with my daughter for 10 to 15 minutes every single day. And no, it's not super easy. And she said, yes, I definitely would have rather waved a magic wand over her, but that's not how plasticity works. Plasticity works through repetition. And so you make a commitment. And, for them, it was necessary to find a time in the day that was going to work for them and their family. But they did that for 10 to 15 minutes every single day, and it has had just a life-changing result. She said, I absolutely saw the changes in her brain happening. I also learned that my own mindset had to change a bit. At the beginning of a module, she said, when Ashley was initially struggling, she was mentally saying to herself, like, she's never going to get this. I see other people on the calls and they're getting it, but I don't know, she might not be the one that gets it. But then she'd see that within a couple of days, things were changing. And she said, that's been a real gift for her to just realize that sometimes her expectations or her mindset were limiting Ashley too. So it's amazing what the program has done for all of us. I knew what we were doing before wasn't working, and there was no going back to that level at school. At that point at the school, we were just putting Band-Aids on. Everybody was doing the best they could with what they had and what they knew. I don't blame the teachers. And even though we were a little skeptical at first, especially because we found you on Facebook, what you offered was different and it just made sense. It had the components that made me feel supported. I thought if this was the last money I spent and it works, it would be worth it. And it was, and it is. So I think it's inspirational to see a kiddo like Ashley, who's no different than your own kid, be able to come out on the other side with just a major, major triumph. So let's take a look at her data, and I'll kind of walk you through why this is statistically significant. I'll teach you a little bit about statistics and why this is super amazing data. So as I mentioned, her phonological awareness went from being 52% accurate to 83% accurate, which is a major statistical change. We'll talk about that in a minute. Reading, holy cow, went from the 10th percentile to the 75th. We'll talk about why that's so statistically significant. And again, the spelling score is actually massive, even though it maybe doesn't look as much as the reading, but I'll explain that in a minute as well. So phonological awareness, if we look at the definition of dyslexia, is one of the underlying skills that a kiddo with dyslexia struggles with. It is an unexpected delay in how the child is processing language. And so when we look at this, it was like 50-50. Half of the time her brain was able to pick it up, half of the time it wasn't. And so she went from not really even being able to hear the sounds in words about half of the time to 83% of the time, she was exactly right on to hear all of those sounds. So could this still grow a little bit? Yes, with a little bit more practice in her reading, she will get to this 100%, I have no doubt. But this is massive statistical gain in 6 months' time, which is the duration that Ashley was in the program. So I want to talk a little bit about statistics. And so you can understand this normal distribution curve and what it means statistically. So in the middle here, we have what we would consider average, or the 50th percentile. And every one of these lines that we have here going up and going down from the middle is what's called a standard deviation. So this would be one standard deviation from the mean. So anytime that we're doing any type of intervention, we're always trying to measure what impact did this intervention have on the child. So we know, because educators have studied this, researchers have studied this, that a typical kid is going to grow from here to this blue line in an entire school year, which is a 0.3 of a standard deviation. So we would expect, like I'll give you my own daughter, for example, she's in the second grade, that when she starts second grade, she might be here at the 50th percentile. And when she finishes second grade, she would have grown a 0.3 of a standard deviation if she made average growth in the second grade year. So we would expect that this is the kind of growth that we would make in an average school year. And why it's important to make more growth than that is because for a kiddo that's behind, we need to be able to close the gap. It's not enough anymore that we make just the same amount of progress as our peers, because that makes us still classically behind every single school year. So if we want to actually catch up and we want to be performing at the same level as our peers, we have to be growing more than what's average. So this would be a moderate statistical significance. We would grow a 0.5 of a standard deviation. Even better would be what we call statistically significant growth, a 0.8 of a standard deviation. So anything that we see that's a 0.8 or higher, we know has had a huge statistically significant impact on this child. And more importantly, like when we're looking at this, it's closing the gap between where this kiddo is now and getting them to where their peers are. So let's take a look at Ashley's data and kind of how this made massive, massive progress for her. So here's where she started, this red dot here at the 10th percentile. And so if she made what would have been typical growth, she would have gone to this yellow dot here. And for most of you with a child with dyslexia, you're like, yeah, they have made some growth. We've grown some. It's not like we've grown nothing, but it's not enough to really be moving the needle. It's not enough to be changing the trajectory of this child's outcome. So if this would have been statistically significant growth for Ashley, she would have been here at this brown dot. But what happened for her is in 6 months, she went 1, 2, nearly 3 standard deviations of growth in 6 months' time, which is kind of unheard of in educational statistics. Like most studies will take you kind of to this brown dot in and around that. So to do this much growth means that we're confident in the methodology that took us there. So this is kid after kid after kid that we see that has this type of growth pre-post. Our average client is making 50 percentile points of growth from beginning to end, anywhere between 4 to 6 months. So this is humongous growth and gain, which absolutely has helped Ashley to close the gap between her and her peers. She's actually creeping up on high average for reading, but she's definitely gone from being low average to average and nearing that high average range in 6 months' time. So did this massively close the gap for her? Absolutely, it sure did. And the same thing is true with spelling. So when we look at where she started at the 5th percentile, if we look at what typical growth in an entire year would have been, it would have moved her from 5 to about 6. And this statistically significant would have put her at 7. She was at the 10th percentile, which is more than statistical significance. So even though the numbers don't look like it moved that much, it still was statistically significant growth and then some for her to move from this 5th to the 10th percentile. And as I mentioned, she had those additional items that were just one letter off. And had she had those patterns correct, it actually would have put her at the 63rd percentile. So still massive gains in spelling, but this is her next horizon. So when Ashley finished the program, like what is it that she's working on? She's working on reading even faster so that she has to expend much less energy to think about the meaning of words. And she's working on spelling patterns because the English language is really nice in that there are 6 different ways that you can spell long A. And so that's not always super intuitive, and she might need a little longer than 6 months to be practicing those spelling patterns. So she's in an advanced course with us to master those in the next 6 months. And so what's amazing is that we can see this massive growth in her within this short period of time that we know will only continue to grow from here. So it would be a miss if I didn't celebrate Mama Tiffany throughout this process, because this absolutely happened because of her partnership with us. So even though she tried many other methods before unsuccessfully, she wasn't able to give up because Ashley didn't have the result and she wasn't feeling confident about herself. She was feeling consistently worse. And so I think it's hard sometimes to feel like, oh, man, we've tried this and then we've tried this and we've tried this and we've invested so much time and energy and money into trying to solve this. But at the end of the day, she didn't have the result. And Ashley was still majorly struggling with reading and still crying every day when you brought up reading. And so you have to come to this moment where you say, I can't give up now because we don't have the result, even though I might be tired, even though I might be, nervous that here's another one that we're going to go to and try to make it work. And we're not sure if it is. She didn't give up. She was willing to show up to the program, do the work, and take the coaching. So yes, we know that we have a beautiful system that guides clients through the process of reading and spelling in a short interval of time. And we know that that's a consistently positive thing that we can do client after client after client. But it does not work if you do not do the work. So this is not for someone who is wanting somebody else to do the work for them. It is not for somebody who is not willing to commit to it and be loosey-goosey about well, I'll just do it when I feel like it. You don't get these kind of results unless you are willing to show up and do what's asked, which is a daily 10 to 15 minutes. And for most families, they're like, wow, that's it, 10 to 15 minutes. But it's doing the work, it's being resourceful, it's taking the coaching. And so Tiffany absolutely was that, and she did an absolutely beautiful job. She didn't expect a magic wand. She provided a safe, loving environment for her daughter to thrive. So we talk a lot about this in the program and we coach on this too, but it's really hard for a kid to learn and grow if they're constantly being given negative feedback. So really, All you have to do as the parent is to follow the directions and provide this loving place for them to learn and make mistakes and know that mistakes are okay, because mistakes actually help you to learn. And so as long as you can do that, you can continue to grow and thrive. She absolutely supported Ashley's mindset and reading throughout the process, and she completely transformed her life. Again, Tiffany said she's reading, and that's amazing. And she feels so confident and good about herself. She's got a book in her hand almost all the time. She's happy. And so as a parent, like, what more could you ask for? That, we got the result we were looking for, and I helped my kid to be confident about who they are and what they're capable of. So that's the best part. So as I was mentioning, like, you need a system if you're going to get your child to close the gap and truly catch up with their peers. You have to make more than what would be this typical growth in a school year. So this is what we know is typical in an entire academic year. This is what we know a statistically significant result is. This is what our average kiddo graduate in the program does for growth. So we know this over literally thousands of clients, that you need this type of growth in order to truly close the gap and help your kiddo to thrive, because these are most of the time average and above average intelligence kiddos that have so much capacity to grow and thrive. And so when you help them to massively accelerate their growth in a short period, it's amazing to see what they could do. So if you're more interested in some of the data and like, oh, I want to look into these statistical significance metrics, here's a reference for you down at the bottom here. So John Hattie has done meta-analyses, which are studies of what are the most impactful things that we can do in learning. And so you'll see that even some of these are 1.3 standard deviation. Ashley's reading score was just like a 2.5 to 3 standard deviations of growth. So we're just super, super proud of what those statistics look like. Feel free to dig into that if you're curious. But I do want to say, again, why it's so, so critical to close the gap for your kiddo. Because this, like, the longer that they have to sit in the struggle mode, they do miss out on opportunities. Whether that is, I can't go to this class because I'm in small group, or I can't take this elective course that I really wanted to take because I need to be in this support class, or I can't go to basketball because I've got 3 hours of homework every night and I can't. There are inevitably missed opportunities. There are current and ongoing struggles. There are future opportunities that might be taken away. There are other people beyond just the child that suffers because of this. It's stressful to see your kiddo crying on a daily basis because of learning, because of school, because they are trying as hard as they can possibly try, and they physically can't. And it's, again, because of that neurological underpinning that we have in how the brain is processing language. But once you support the child in being able to activate those areas of the brain, and they can actually read and spell, it's amazing to see how the beliefs change, how the potential changes, how the future actions and the results and all of those things shift in the positive direction, as opposed to just kind of this negative spiral of struggle. So when you close the gap, you can improve academic performance, you can increase self-esteem and confidence, you can give the child better mental health, greater access to opportunities. So it's so, so important that you find something that is not a multiple year journey. You can find those where they'll say, yep, we've got to go through all 6 books of this, or you need to go through all of these levels of this. And when you ask about how long that's intended to take, it's multiple years. But what we know through Ashley's case and many, many others is that this was months, a blip in her 9-year-old life, that she spent 6 months working really, really hard on helping her brain to hear and respond to language. And now she's got an entirely different skill set, outlook, confidence, all of that, which is just so, so powerful. So I want to just kind of close out our session today by telling you a little bit more about how you can receive help, because it is overwhelming to have all this information and know, like, where do I go? What do I do? So if you're still unsure if dyslexia is what you're really dealing with, it can be really, really helpful to screen. So we offer a dyslexia discovery workshop. It's an online screening tool that you can do in just 20 minutes at home, which is using norm referenced assessments that will help you to know for sure if your child is truly dealing with dyslexia or if it's just that they might not like reading. But having that certainty and that data really does help you to make good next steps moving forward for your child. And second, I would say if you already know that you're struggling and what you are doing is not working, maybe you've been in tutoring for multiple years and you're seeing slow, if any, progress. Maybe your child is in an intervention at school and they've got an IEP, but it's just really not moving the needle. Please know through Ashley's example and others that you absolutely can massively move the needle for kids within a short amount of time. It's just possible that you have not worked on the root causes of dyslexia that cause the brain to not function in the way that we would want it to for language. And once you do that, it's really incredible to see how they can take off and do exactly as Ashley did. Really kind of just transform their whole experience with literacy. So if you know that you need some help and you want to see if this system could be right for you, we offer complimentary calls to anybody to try and determine if this is a fit based on what's going on for your child. So we dig deeply into that with you on the call. We ask you all kinds of questions about where you've been and what you've tried, and really try to learn more about where you want to go. And if it's a match, we will definitely talk to you about what it would look like to enroll you in the program and get you going so that you too can make massive progress. If it's not a fit, we will let you know that as well, and we'll direct you to whatever serves you most. But either way, know that these are two options that you can take now, whether you're trying to figure things out through screening or if you're ready to take action and you want to see if this is a fit. Please feel free to reach out and we will happily set you up with a member of our team. So with that, I would like to kind of conclude our session for today and open it up to any questions that you may have about anything at all.